Before we had smartphones, before we had cities, before we even had the word extinction, we had spears. And we were really good at using them. Tens of thousands of years ago, as Homo sapiens began tiptoeing out of Africa, the rest of the world was basically a prehistoric petting zoo. Except everything was supersized, occasionally venomous, and absolutely not interested in being petted. We're talking 20-foot lizards, birds the size of horses, and bears tall enough to high-five a second-story window. And then, like clockwork, whenever humans showed up, those animals didn't just die off slowly. They vanished fast, as if someone left the extinction switch unlocked and a bunch of naked apes kept flipping it. This isn't just about mammoths and saber-toothed cats. This is the story of all the bizarre, jaw-dropping creatures that had the extreme misfortune of meeting us. Some got hunted, some got cooked, and some probably just gave up after seeing their first campfire. Let's start with a continent full of giant birds, killer lizards, and marsupial hippos. Australia. When humans first stepped foot on the sunburnt continent of Australia around 50,000 years ago, they weren't entering a land of kangaroos and koalas. No, they walked into a freakish dreamscape where evolution had gone rogue. The animals didn't care for subtlety, and nothing had ever seen a spear before. Let's start with millennia, because if there's one creature that perfectly encapsulates Australia but make it horrifying, it's this guy. Millennia was basically a Komodo dragon that hit the gym too hard. This land-dwelling lizard stretched up to 23 feet long and weighed over 1,000 pounds. And it wasn't just big, it was likely venomous. Imagine hiking through the eucalyptus and suddenly realizing you're being stalked by a car-sized reptile with a toxic bite. That's not a bad day. That's a whole deleted scene from a horror movie. Now, meet Diprotodon, the largest marsupial that ever lived. Picture a wombat. Now inflate it until it's the size of a modern-day hippo. These slow-moving, plant-munching tanks roamed the open forests and plains in herds. They didn't have natural predators until humans showed up. One well-aimed spear probably brought down a Diprotodon calf. 2 or 3, and the adults were on the menu. There are even ancient aboriginal stories that might reference Diprotodon, describing bunyanips or giant wombat-like creatures near waterholes. Myth or memory? Either way, the fossil record suggests the humans got the last word. Then there's Genyornis newtoni, also known as the Thunderbird, which, spoiler alert, did not make it to modern times. This bird was around 7 feet tall and weighed over 500 pounds. It couldn't fly, but it could run fast, and it laid eggs the size of footballs. Bad news. Humans probably ate those eggs like they were Sunday brunch. Burnt Genyornis eggshells have been found alongside human campsites, charred just enough to prove we were scrambling them long before hens were a thing. So yeah, omelets of doom. The wildest part? All of these megafauna vanished within just a few thousand years of human arrival. That might sound slow in Netflix time, but in evolutionary terms, it's the blink of a crocodile's eye. This rapid disappearance is often blamed on a mix of overhunting and environmental changes, especially the use of fire. Early Australians used controlled burns to shape the landscape for hunting, but those fires also altered habitats faster than many species could adapt. And let's not forget Procoptodon goliath, the short-faced kangaroo. This wasn't your bouncy backyard roo. It stood over 6.5 feet tall, weighed around 500 pounds, and walked more like a sumo wrestler than a pogo stick. With forward-facing eyes and a weirdly human-like posture, this kangaroo might have given early humans a serious uncanny valley vibe before someone decided it would make a good coat. Ice Age Europe wasn't a frozen wasteland dotted with miserable humans in furs huddling around fires. It was a living, breathing, and frankly terrifying Megafauna Theme Park. Picture this: endless steppes stretching from France to Siberia, herds of shaggy giants stomping through permafrost, and apex predators lurking just outside the firelight. It was beautiful, brutal, and bustling with creatures that looked like they'd been drawn by a medieval artist on a fever dream. Let's start with the obvious celebrity, the woolly mammoth, Mammuthus primigenius. You've seen the fridge magnets and the museum skeletons, but what doesn't always come through is just how common they were. These weren't rare beasts. Europe was basically tripping over mammoths during the late Pleistocene. Standing about 11 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 6 tons, these guys were like elephant tanks wrapped in shag carpeting. And humans? We didn't just watch them from afar. We hunted them, skinned them, and turned their bones into huts. Literally. In Ukraine and Russia, there are archaeological sites where mammoth bones were used as building material. That's not DIY, it's Ice Age IKEA. Right alongside them were the woolly rhinoceroses, Quailodonta antiquitatis. Less famous, equally absurd. These were enormous, two-horned bulldozers that could plow through snowdrifts like they were butter. Up to 13 feet long and sporting a massive front horn that could reach nearly 4 feet, they were built like prehistoric battering rams. Unfortunately, those horns didn't do much against coordinated hunting parties with spears and ambition. Humans definitely left their mark. Literally. Woolly rhinos are depicted in some of the oldest cave art we have. Speaking of art, enter the cave lions, Panthera spelaea, and cave bears, Ursus spelaeus. Two predators that didn't just haunt the shadows, they were etched into stone by early human hands. Cave lions were bigger than modern lions, possibly without manes, and they didn't mind the cold. These weren't the lazy zoo cats of today. They were muscular, group-hunting killers. As for the cave bears, they weren't cuddly yogi types either. We're talking 1,000-pound bruisers with a love of caves, which, inconveniently, humans also liked. Nothing like showing up to your new cave apartment and realizing a bear already has the lease. Then there's the lesser-known, but equally haunting detail: Neanderthals. For tens of thousands of years, Europe wasn't Homo sapiens' exclusive playground. Neanderthals had been living there for ages, and there was a brief, awkward overlap. Think weird roommates who sometimes shared tools and occasionally got really close. There's evidence of interaction, gene flow, and maybe a bit of cultural exchange. Whether Neanderthals contributed to the extinction of megafauna, or whether they just got out-competed by us with our better weapons and social networks, is still debated. Either way, they were gone by about 40,000 years ago. Homo sapiens won Europe, and the Ice Age Zoo started shutting down. And through all of this, humans were watching, drawing, remembering. The cave art at Chauvet and Lascaux isn't just doodles, it's a window into their world. There are lions drawn mid-stride, rhinos mid-charge, mammoths with surprising anatomical detail. These weren't distant myths, they were neighbors. Dangerous, majestic neighbors you occasionally stabbed and ate. But despite this coexistence, it didn't last. Over thousands of years, whether by hunting, climate shifts, or just a slow squeeze on ecosystems, Europe's megafauna started to vanish. The ice melted, the forest spread, and the giants disappeared, leaving behind bones, art, and a lot of questions. Now, if Ice Age Europe was intense, the Mammoth Steppe was basically prehistoric hardcore mode. Stretching from modern-day France all the way through Siberia and across into what's now Alaska and the Yukon, this was one of the most extreme ecosystems Earth ever hosted. Think of it as the Ice Age superhighway, cold, dry, and filled with more megafauna per square mile than a toddler's sticker book. And yes, humans absolutely took the scenic route through it. Let's talk about the stars of this frozen frontier, starting with, you guessed it, more woolly mammoths. Out here, they were so common, they might as well have been the local livestock. Fossils are everywhere, and thanks to the permafrost, they're ridiculously well preserved. We're talking intact skin, hair, even muscle tissue. It's like nature accidentally refrigerated the evidence. These mammoths weren't just Ice Age mascots, they were survival kits on legs. Early humans likely followed them for food, tools, and shelter. Mammoth ribs made great tent supports. Kind of grim. Definitely resourceful. And they weren't alone. Meet the steppe bison, Bison priscus, a tank-like herbivore that looked like it was perpetually flexing. These bison were bigger than their modern cousins, and much hairier because Ice Age. Humans painted them on cave walls, hunted them across the tundra, and probably cursed at them when they charged unprovoked. Also stomping around was Elasmotherium, the so-called Siberian unicorn. Not quite the glittery horse of legend, more like a hairy rhinoceros with a single massive horn on its forehead, possibly up to 3 feet long. While there's debate about whether humans overlapped with the last of these creatures, it's not impossible. Imagine encountering that in a snowstorm. Yeah, the Ice Age was not playing around. And then there's the giant ground sloth, specifically Megatherium's northern cousins. These weren't the slow, adorable tree huggers of today's rainforests. These were lumbering, clawed behemoths the size of a small car. They probably weren't fast, but they were strong enough to tear down trees. Whether humans hunted them in this region is debated, but the overlap in time is real. At the very least, we had front row seats to their final curtain call. The big game predator here wasn't a saber-toothed cat or a lion. It was us. By the time humans crossed into Beringia, that now submerged land bridge connecting Siberia to Alaska, they weren't rookies. They knew how to track, hunt, and team up. What they didn't know was that this passageway would lead them to an entirely new, megafaunal buffet. But before we jump ahead to North America, let's be clear. Just getting across Beringia was a feat. This place wasn't a pleasant stroll. It was a tundra death trap. Frozen rivers, open steppes, and mile-wide glaciers made for a journey that was equal parts terrifying and exhausting. And yet, people made it. They followed the mammoths, the bison, and whatever else looked edible. Some stayed in the Arctic, others moved south. What's remarkable is how quickly humans moved once they were in. The fossil evidence suggests people spread rapidly into the Americas, and not long after, things started dying. Again. In Siberia and Beringia, it wasn't just a climate shift or an asteroid or a disease. It was a wave of hunters with tools, fire, and a knack for teamwork. Combined with warming temperatures and changing vegetation, it was enough to collapse ecosystems that had been stable for millennia. When humans finally made it into North America, roughly 13,000 years ago, give or take a few ice bridges, they didn't walk into an empty land. They walked into a prehistoric wonderland, teeming with animals so big, so weird, and so spectacularly doomed, it almost reads like bad fiction. There were mammoths, yes, but also mastodons, giant sloths, American lions, camels, horses, and glyptodonts, which looked like an armadillo mated with a tank. Spoiler alert, most of them didn't survive the encounter. This is where the Blitzkrieg theory kicks in, a flashy name for a deadly idea, that humans showed up and megafauna died off fast. According to this theory, the first wave of hunter-gatherers, often linked to the Clovis culture, blitzed across the continent with a deadly combo of mobility, weapons, and hunger. And the fossil record does show an eerie pattern. Humans arrive, big animals vanish, sometimes in centuries, sometimes even faster. Let's talk about some of the casualties. The mastodon, Mammoth americanum, wasn't just a mammoth knockoff. These were forest-dwelling, tusked elephants with flatter heads and shorter, more muscular builds. Their teeth were better suited for chewing woody vegetation, which they did while minding their own business. until the Clovis folks turned up. Mastodon bones have been found with stone tools embedded in them, which is about as direct a piece of evidence as you're going to get. One site even has a mastodon rib with a spear tip lodged inside it. Not ideal. Then there's Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat. Giant fangs, ambush predator, and built like a murder machine. But despite their size and weaponry, Smilodon went extinct not long after humans arrived. The cats were powerful, but probably specialized. Maybe too specialized. If their mega herbivore prey disappeared, so did they. You can't eat what's extinct. Well, you can, but only once. And oh boy, the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. This monster was the largest terrestrial mammalian carnivore North America ever produced. Standing over 12 feet tall when upright and weighing up to 2,000 pounds, it could run faster than a modern sprinter and probably smelled you coming from miles away. It wasn't just a predator, it was a kleptoparasite. It likely stole kills from other animals, possibly including humans. Imagine cooking a mammoth steak and a bear the size of a sedan strolls in and just takes it. Humans may have hunted them, avoided them, or both. Either way, they're gone. And let's not forget the American lion, Panthera atrox, which was even larger than today's African lion. It stalked open plains, hunted megafauna, and probably didn't appreciate humans muscling into its territory with stone tools and an attitude. But not all the lost giants were predators. Glyptodonts were walking boulders with clubbed tails and shells that could weigh a ton. If you're thinking, probably hard to kill, you're not wrong. But humans were persistent and inventive, and they definitely liked free meat. Same goes for the North American camel and horse. Yes, horses and camels actually evolved here before spreading elsewhere, but ironically they went extinct here, only to be reintroduced much later by European colonists. Somewhere out there, a paleontologist is still bitter about that. So what actually caused the extinction wave? Was it really a human blitzkrieg, or was climate change the real culprit? Well, the last ice age was ending around this time. Glaciers retreated, ecosystems shifted, and vegetation changed fast. But here's the problem. This kind of climate swing had happened before. Multiple times, in fact. And yet the megafauna survived those earlier shifts. South America didn't get the memo that the Ice Age was ending. When humans arrived, likely by both land and coastal routes, this continent was still rocking some truly unhinged megafauna. Think SUV-sized ground sloths, giant armadillos, and terror birds that looked like angry ostriches with murder on their minds. Let's start with the sloths. Megatherium was basically a walking tree trunk with claws. Standing up, it could reach over 20 feet tall and weigh 4 tons. It probably wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. Until, of course, humans showed up with pointy sticks and zero chill. There's at least one fossil site in Argentina where a Megatherium skeleton has suspiciously spear-shaped holes in its pelvis. So, yeah, not a natural injury. Then there's Glyptodon, the prehistoric armadillo with armor thick enough to deflect spears, allegedly. About the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, it had a clubbed tail and zero patience. But when hungry humans get desperate, even tanks are fair game. Some evidence even suggests people may have used the shells as shelters. 'Cause who wouldn't want to live in a turtle the size of a hot tub? Oh, and Forus racids, the so-called terror birds. Up to 10 feet tall, these flightless predators could sprint like an Olympic athlete and probably pecked like a jackhammer. But by the time humans fully spread through South America, the last of these birds were already declining. Still, imagine running into one of those while gathering berries. Fossils and kill sites in places like Patagonia show clear signs of human interaction with these giants. Bones with cut marks, tools nearby, even cooking pits. The story is the same. Humans arrived, megafauna disappeared. Not always instantly, but the clock definitely started ticking. South America was the final frontier of Ice Age extinction, and humans once again brought the heat, sometimes literally. Here's the twist no one saw coming. The continent where humans evolved, where our entire species got its chaotic start, is also the one place where giant animals didn't vanish en masse. Africa is still home to elephants, rhinos, hippos, giraffes, crocodiles, and lions. So, what gives? Simple answer: evolution. African megafauna saw us coming a mile away. Literally. Unlike in Australia or the Americas, African animals didn't get surprised by clever apes with fire and obsidian knives. They grew up with us. Over hundreds of thousands of years, they adapted to avoid being eaten by the original tool-wielding maniac. Homo sapiens. Prey species got faster, warier, and less trusting. Predators learned not to mess with the loud, upright ape that traveled in groups and threw rocks for fun. That's the coevolution hypothesis, and it holds up. We hunted them? Sure, but not at blitzkrieg speed. Africa's ecosystems evolved under pressure from us, so they were already in survival mode before the rest of the world even knew we existed. But that's not to say it was all peaceful. Plenty of African megafauna still bit the dust after modern humans emerged. Pelorovis, the giant wild cattle, is gone. So is the giant African buffalo, the short-faced hyena, and the huge saber-toothed cats like Homotherium. And let's not forget giant crocodiles like Crocodilus anthropophagus, literally man-eating crocodile. Yeah, that was a thing. Still, compared to other continents, the scale of extinction was mild. Africa didn't lose its mammoths because it never had them. It didn't lose its terror birds because it was too busy inventing actual terror. See, Nile crocodiles. And while some megafauna did fade out, partly due to climate, partly due to hunting, it was slower, less catastrophic, and more mutual. Even today, African wildlife is dealing with the same old human nonsense. Habitat destruction, poaching, population pressure. It's a rerun, but with jeeps and drones instead of hand axes. So why did Africa keep its giants? Because they evolved to live with us. They learned to run, to hide, to fight back. They got wise to our tricks. And honestly, they're still doing a better job than most. It's the only place where megafauna and humans manage to share a continent without total collapse. Which, given our track record, is nothing short of miraculous. Just when you think humans couldn't possibly surprise more megafauna to death, in come the islands, where the extinction hits were even weirder, quicker, and sometimes straight up absurd. Let's start with New Zealand, humanity's last major landmass to settle. By the time Polynesians arrived around 1,200 years ago, the islands were home to moa, giant flightless birds up to 12 feet tall and 500 pounds. These feathered monsters were basically walking steaks with no natural predators. Enter humans, and within 200 years, gone. All 9 species wiped out. What could take down a 12-foot bird? Answer: hungry people with fire and attitude. And where there were moas, there were Haast's eagles. These were the largest eagles to ever exist. Wingspans up to 10 feet, talons like meat hooks, and they probably hunted moas by diving at 50 miles per hour and smashing into them like feathery missiles. Their downfall? They depended on the moas. No moas, no lunch, no more giant death eagles. Thanks, extinction domino effect. Next up, Madagascar, the land of what even is that? For starters, elephant birds. The heaviest birds to ever walk the earth, weighing over 1,000 pounds. Their eggs were the size of bowling balls, and yes, humans definitely cracked a few. Alongside them were giant lemurs, some the size of gorillas, and hippo-like mammals that probably didn't appreciate company. Again, humans arrive, and boom, mass extinction party? Some of these species lasted until about 1,000 years ago, which means ancient Malagasy stories might be echoing real, now extinct animals. Then there's the Caribbean, which used to host giant ground sloths and giant rodents that looked like capybaras on steroids. Many of these lasted until humans island hopped their way in, and then, well, you've heard this song before. Between hunting, habitat destruction, and the arrival of invasive species like dogs, rats, and pigs, most of the unique island megafauna didn't stand a chance. Island ecosystems were especially vulnerable. Evolution without predators made animals fearless and slow, which worked great until humans entered stage left with fire and domestic animals that turned everything upside down. In many cases, it wasn't direct hunting that killed them, it was ecological chaos. Rabbits eating all the plants, pigs rooting through nests, rats devouring eggs before they could hatch. It was an extinction buffet, and humans were the head chefs. These smaller, isolated extinctions may not have been as dramatic as mammoths on the mammoth steppe, but they were often faster and more final. No room to escape, no time to adapt, no plan B. In the end, the story of the animals the first humans saw isn't just about extinction, it's about power. The power to change landscapes, to topple ecosystems, to erase millennia of evolution in a few hundred years. And if we're lucky, maybe the power to learn from that. Because one thing's for sure, the next time we meet a giant animal, it'll probably be in a lab, behind glass, or in a documentary, and it'll be extinct.